Hey everybody, Brian here, and welcome to BMAD Code. What an amazing week this has been in tech. And there has been amazing releases from Google, Anthropic, OpenAI. Sonnet 4.0 came out, but there's one other game changer that came out earlier this week that probably flew under everybody's radar, and that is the BMAD agent is live and ready for action. So I'm going to be sharing with you all the amazing updates in the BMAD Method V3 and how you can put it into practice right now. It's simplified and it is super powerful. This is a revolutionary update. It is a mind-blowing experience. Perfect time to start using the BMAD method. The BMAD method has gone through some drastic changes, but first let's talk about why does vibe coding fail? First of all, you just get the agent where you build your project halfway through, you get to a certain point and it's just going to start going off the rails and doing dumb things. And even with the better coding agents, the more complex your project gets, the harder it's going to be for the agent to stay on the rails. Resources get wasted. If you do not optimize and plan ahead, you're going to be burning credits and burning money. If we don't give the agents the right information, they're not going to know what to do. You're going to see agents putting files in random places you don't expect, and they're not going to remember where they did it, maybe just steps before. What do you do when you're halfway through a project, you're working on your MVP, maybe you've finished almost all of your epics and then you forgot a major feature, or you realize you need to do a big change? Well, in the past, that has been a real pain to recover from, but now the BMAD method will actually support change recovery. And then finally, failing to plan. If you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. And that is what the BMAD method is about. It is going to help you brainstorm your idea, plan it, and put it into motion so the developer agents can work from beginning to end. Why has the BMAD method evolved? I started with vibe coding, but you get so far and we just talked about all of the problems that you run into. So from vibe coding, I started using a lot of cursor rules, and I started to learn that you can create documents that help keep your agents on the rail. And it was still fragile and it was unoptimized. So I came up with the idea of creating agile personas that work as custom modes. There was issues with the V1 method, one of them being each agent was hard-coded to the task at hand, and it was very hard to optimize them and customize them as people would like to do. So V2 was really about four main things: optimizing and utilizing the web, taking a lot of the work of building this planning out of the IDE, saving so much time, effort, and money, taking the power of deep research from the web to really investigate better ways of doing things. But the two key innovations in V2, I think, were checklists and templates. By having templates, we can now define exactly what our PRD architecture would look like in a separate file. We were not having to modify the agent because we had a separate template file. And also the agents were trained to work section by section. So the agents work with us, explaining to us, working back and forth with us to produce really clear documents. But still, V2 was complex in that it was difficult to set up all of these agents, and there was challenges with each different IDE and web platform. If you wanted to use some of my larger agents that worked really well in Gemini gems, it might not work in the custom GPT without drastically reducing the file. So that's why we led to version 3. Version 3 fully optimize this so you would not have to have these bloated files that you would upload and create. Instead, the agent files themselves and the agent definitions got smaller, and they got optimized by uploading separate files to augment them. And now they work perfectly with Gemini gems and ChatGPT. But the other big innovation of V3 is full customization and a new Uber AI orchestration agent I call the BMAD agent, which is really the most exciting thing that I have seen in a long time. The BMAD agent really is your ultimate AI orchestration partner. This BMAD agent coordinates as your method coach, and it organizes your whole entire AI Agile team, dynamically adapting to become the one Agile agent that you need right now. Product manager, Scrum Master, PO. And you can also define those agents now in V3 to have the exact tasks that you want them to have. But how do we really get to from idea to implementation with the full agent flow in the BMAD method? If you have a seed of an idea, maybe you want to get something out in the market and you're not exactly sure what it is, you're going to first talk talk to the BMAD agent, and the BMAD agent is going to suggest that you do brainstorming with the business analyst coach. It is going to help you form it into a conceptual product brief, but it's also going to help you do deep research if you want. It is going to help you look for competition, see what they're doing, look for competing products or just similar products to maybe help you figure out what is unique about your idea so you can get something out in the market that is truly interesting and then hand that off to the product manager. Now, if you're using the power of Gemini 2.5 in the web, which I highly recommend, you can run most of these agents now all in the same chat thread. You no longer have to export a document, re-import it into a new chat. So your agents are going to be able to virtually pass around your brainstorming, your PRD brief that we just talked about, over to the product manager, who's going to help you elicit and define a beautiful product requirements document that is going to have all of your high-level epics and stories worked through in an order that makes the most sense for the developer agents to build your project on the rails perfectly in the right execution order. That is going to be virtually handed off, if you have a front end, to the UI UX design architect. This is a specialized agent that does 3 different things. It can help you create a prompt for V0 or Lovable that is going to build a UI basically in a one-shot for your whole front-end application with all of the knowledge of the full PRD, MVP, and the architecture. The design architect also will help you just figure out what the UX and UI spec is. It's going to ask you questions. It's going to have you detail what types of themes and colors you want, or you can upload images, but it is going to help distill that down to a very clear document that the build will be able to follow later on to build the UI of your dream. But not just a generic looking admin UI, but really a UI that encapsulates exactly what you're trying to imagine in your head and get actually on the screen. So it doesn't look like just some generic vibe coded crap that everybody else is putting out there. This will help you create your unique artistic visual vision. The application architect is really going to look at all of the MVP requirements of the PRD. It's been passed virtually in memory. It is going to look at all of that, and then it is going to look at all of those epics and stories, and it is going to make sure that it creates the source tree and the architecture decisions that will make sense to fully build out the PRD. If you are an expert and already know what design and architecture you want to do and what technology choices you want, you can actually also feed in a document that has your preferences for coding standards, design patterns, or technology choices. And the architecture will take all of that into account, see what fits, and it is trained to either accept those, talk to you about them, or offer alternatives. But you might not know those things. You might be a beginner. You might not even know what language you want to use. In this architecture agent, and even going back to the previous agents, they're going to work with you, understand the level and where you're coming from, and help you learn and understand and choose the right technology choices. It's going to show you trade-offs. It's going to explain to you why it chose one thing over another thing. It's going to help you also make sure that the agent is really thinking through things and giving you the best possible options. It's then going to pass this off to the product owner, just like we had before, but this is not combined with the Scrum Master anymore. The product owner has one job when we're in the web flow, and it's one of the most important jobs. It is going to look at the architecture, the PRD, and the output from the design analyst or the design architect. And it is going to run through a masterful checklist that really makes sure that everything works together and everything is updated. Once we're done with the product owner, that's where we probably have all of our artifacts and we're ready to put it into the IDE. The Scrum Master or the product owner in the IDE will run a document sharding task. This will give the agents the intelligence to produce the high-level, detailed, lower-level stories with tasks and subtasks, and the artifacts that the developer needs to implement your stories perfectly. And then, of course, we have our developer agents. These are the workhorses that are going to be taking our granular, very detailed user stories. And I'm going to show you an example of some of the user stories, just how detailed they are, that are guaranteed to keep your agents on the rail, putting things in the right place, following the right protocols, and more importantly, not requiring the creation of tons of rules to keep it on the rails. It's going to basically know everything it needs just from the user story and the details that the Scrum Master puts in it from all of the sharded artifacts. And as I mentioned, there is now a task and an agent that can help you with course correction. So if you're halfway through your MVP and you realize there's something you want to add in, or you want to change course, or maybe you want to throw out one database for another database, it's a huge change. The course correction agent is going to work with you, figure out what the best approach is. Do you have to go back to the beginning? Do you have to throw away a few stories? Is there a way to pivot in the sand and move forward? It will also help you update all of the artifacts you need to, all of the future remaining stories, add new stories that you need so you can get back on track quickly. It will help you do that. It's amazing. This is a brand new feature of the V3 BMAD method. In V2, I mentioned that we had templates. In V2, we had a checklist. The PM, the architect, the design architect, the PO, and the Scrum Master. After they do anything, they will run these detailed checklists. It forces the LLMs to further deeper think about what they've done and reassess everything. But what is the change for V3 that really gives us the ultimate customization? Well, we furthermore, instead of just having the roles tied to what actions they can do, we've now split out the personas. So you can make them creative, you can customize them how you want. And additionally, we've split out tasks. If you wanted to do the course correction task, you could do that just by pulling in the task. But by having all these pieces, we can also now fully customize the BMAD agent to be able to have whatever agents, tasks, checklists, and personas that we want. We can also now customize multiple developer agents that are specialized to the front end or the back end that have their own specialties and can help you master certain languages, certain frameworks, or be an expert in front end or back end and really focused on that specialty. And it does make a big difference when you do that. This new feature in V3 is advanced reflective elicitation and brainstorming actions. What that really means is when you go through critical pieces of your document, whether you're working through the PRD or the architecture, as you're reviewing each section, it's then going to give you 8 options. And the first 7 options are basically going to allow you to tell the agent to do different things, to self-reflect on itself or improve things. Critical self-reflection, user goal alignment. This is going to force the agent to really reflect, is it meeting the goals of the overall project? Could it have done something differently? Generate and evaluate alternative design solutions. So what this is going to do is this is going to force the agent to look at what it told you and present 2 or 3 possible alternatives, and then it's going to have to either defend what it chose and tell you why it chose it, or potentially choose one of these other ones and also give you some options to help you really understand its thought process, but also forcing the agent to further think about how it got to where it did. Also, there's user journey and integration or interaction stress testing. And then finally, we have the deep dive into design assumptions. We really challenge the agent to think about hidden constraints that could impact the development success. I'm going to show you how easy it is to set this up and install it now. It is so easy compared to the way it used to be, and you can start experiencing the magic with the BMAD agent today. So all you got to do is clone and install. This is going to work in Cursor, Windsurf, Roo, Klein, Copilot. But more importantly, this works great with Gemini Gems and ChatGPT's custom GPTs. I highly recommend the Gemini Gems. And start with the default. I already have a build done in the repo, so you can just take all the files, even if you don't want to build it yourself, put it in the web, and start playing with these agents today. And then finally, we have a great community on the GitHub repo for the BMAD method. So you can, share your suggestions. This whole thing is meant to be customizable and work for the way you want to work. So you can customize this and share your suggestions in the forum. A lot of people are doing amazing things with the BMAD agent and the BMAD method. And so there's a lot of people just willing to help you out, and we're all making this better together. This is an amazing system. This works in greenfield, this works in brownfield, and this works everywhere in between. All right, so let's now check out the BMAD method. Again, there's a very active community here. Come in and check it out, see how other people are using it. You can also suggest issues or changes, pull requests. Love feedback from the community because a lot of the ideas in V3 came from people suggesting some of these amazing changes. Getting started is now easier than ever. Anybody can do this, and I want you to just try this for yourself. All you have to do, come to the web build sample, and there's these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 files here. All you need to do is, first of all, I would clone the repo. It's much easier to work with. So if you clone the repo locally, you'll have the BMAD method, just like here. This is the same GitHub that we were just looking at. And you can go to the web build sample. And first of all, this is the agent prompt. Now look at this agent prompt. You'll see that this is slightly less than 8,000 characters. So this will work with custom GPTs, and this will also work with Gemini gems. This is the only file that you need to copy and paste the text. So I'm going to copy all of this. Go into Gemini. Models are always advancing. You can play with the different models, but the 2.5 Pro is going to give you the huge context window that is just amazing. And then what we are going to do, so we are going to say new gem, and we're just going to paste all of that information right in here in the instructions. You need to give it a name. I would call it BMAD. So we'll just go to upload files. We're going to select every file except for the agent prompt. The prompt, again, is the instructions. Very similar in custom GPT. All of these other files we want to attach as knowledge for the agent. This is going to give it all of the intelligence and all of the personas. And now we can save here. We can start chat with it. And now this is to BMAD. We can say /help if we don't know what to do, or we can just start talking to the BMAD agent. The BMAD agent has a knowledge base, and it is knowledgeable about all of the agents and all of the different workflows. But it also has these amazing help commands that you can use. So the BMAD agent tells you that you can go to YOLO mode and just plow through all of your documents. I don't recommend it, but if you want to work really fast or maybe just work through a demo of the whole process, you can put it on YOLO mode. You can get a list of all the available agents and what they're able to do. So let's do that right now. Let's see what we have available to us and what they're capable of. And so you can see this tells us all of our different agents. We've given names to them. Some of them also have custom personalities, and we can see what type of tasks they can do. And as I said, the BMAD method is very customizable. So people have told me in the past, their version of Agile is different than my version of Agile. And to be honest with you, across all of the industry, there is no one way of doing Agile, and different roles do different things. So if you feel the product owner should be the one creating the product requirements document, you can customize it and have that set up. If you don't think there's no room for a product manager and instead you want to have only a PO, you can do that. You can change out the analyst. You can have the architect and the design architect be the same person. You can do so much configuration. It's wonderful. If I want to work on brainstorming, I can just talk to the analyst and say that I want to brainstorm on an idea. I don't even know what I want to build yet. Or when I'm ready to make my product brief, again, I can create the project brief with the analyst. And then when I'm done and the project brief is done, we've worked through all the sections from the template that she's going to work with us on. We tell her, let's hand it off to the product manager, and BMAD will orchestrate that, and in memory, it will hand it off. We can still keep copying all these artifacts out so we have them, but they're all being passed around in the context. And I've been able to go through a whole workflow of a brief, a large PRD, a large architecture, plus design, plus all of the checklists without having it start hallucinating or going off the rails. And you'll know if you run out of the context window, but you can have very long chats with this and actually do so much before you ever have to start a new chat. So once your artifacts are done, you can actually start developing. So when you come into here, again, this is the BMAD method. What you'll want to do is if you have your project, whether you're starting a new project or you've already started a project and you want to start using this method, all you have to do is copy over the BMAD agent into your project. I can show you a project I have here, and you can see I've been working on this a little bit. I've already completed one epic with with Claude 4. It's going so smooth, and you can see all I've done is I've put the BMAD agent here. The BMAD agent is made up of multiple files and folders. There's a checklist, a data, a personas, a tasks, and a templates folder. And if you'll notice from our web build sample, what do we have here? We have checklists, data, personas, tasks, and templates. Whatever folders are in the BMAD agent, it is going to create a compiled folder or a compiled file of all the content in that folder. So all of my personas, let's look at the PM, is a persona that is really tuned to being a very good product manager. So what are the principles of a product manager that are already active, always active? Well, they're right here. And you can see this is a person or a persona that is going to champion you and champion the end user and really work closely with you, understanding what we're trying to build and why we're trying to build it. These are ingrained into the core principles of this persona. Unlike the previous methods, you will not see anything in here about the PM being able to create a PRD or do any other tasks. That is because that is now all fully customizable. These are just the personas. So the analyst, you'll see, is curiosity driven because this is a brainstorming expert and has very different personas, very action oriented, loves to be strategic and do market research. The architect is very analytical. This is not getting into the what they can do. The tasks are all the thing that we define in the BMAD method that the agent can do for us. So what are some of those things? The agent can create a library for us and index our index folder to make sure it is a good resource for finding all of the information in our docs folder. It can create a UI UX spec. It can create the PRD, the front-end architecture. It can help us create masterful prompts to feed into the deep research because the prompt that you put into deep research also affects the quality that you get out of running deep research when you're doing it in the web. It can help us generate prompts for Lovable or V0 or Replit to create these amazing prompts that we can one-shot our UI. It can help us course correct, like I mentioned before. And also there's a task here to run checklists. So we might want to define all sorts of checklists in the future. By just having a generic task called run checklist, we can now allow any agent to be able to run any checklist that we defined. Now right here, we have story definition of done checklist to really make sure that the developer did everything it should. Did it test? Did it clean up the story? Did it check everything is complete? Did it run integration tests? Whatever we want to put in our DoD could be in this checklist. We have the PO master checklist that I described before, which is really making sure that everything is cohesive and anything that was updated in one document is reflected in all the other documents and that there's no gaps in logic that our developer agents will later face. We have change checklists. The architecture checklist is what it uses to make sure that the architecture that was produced from the template is spot on and matched closely to our PRD. So you can look at these checklists. They're all part of the format. This is a mistake here. This should be a markdown file, but text files work also. So we have our checklists. We have our tasks. We have our personas. And as I mentioned, we have our templates, right? So you can define what sections you want in your PRD. If you want your PRD laid out like I do, then this is the way to do it. If you want to have your stories following the same way I have my stories, this is the way to do it. By the way, the Scrum Master is going to put a lot more information than you see right here. So the developer agent is really going to stay on the rails and be able to get stuff done. In the web, we have this configuration file. And this file, when we compile our web build, becomes agent config. Now in here, we've said what agents we want. So maybe in our version of the BMAD method, or for our web agent, we only want to have 3 agents, or maybe we only want to have 4 agents. Maybe we want to have an analyst, and then we want to have a technical product owner that can do PRD, architecture, and the front end, right? Like we can make any expert we want because we can define what tasks they're capable of doing, what templates they have access to, and what checklists they're allowed to run beyond what the tasks give them. So we can create an Uber agent if we want to, beyond the BMAD agent that can do anything. But I really recommend kind of keeping the personas tied to what they're doing. Because again, the persona really makes the architect a keen expert at producing your architecture. So matching the personas does make sense, but again, this is all customizable. And speaking of customization, one of the best things here is you can further customize by putting in a prompt right here. So this is a customization where it's just giving them a different type of personality just to test it out. But you can do so much more with these customizations. For example, if you're going to customize your dev agent, and by the way, there's also an IDE orchestrator to do all this, and it's a very similar setup here. But this is where you can create your full stack dev or your front end dev. So what is the difference? Well, I've told it to specialize in Next.js, React, TypeScript, HTML, and Tailwind. So now this is really going to take on the persona of a master front end web application developer, whereas this is more of a master generalist. If I knew I was doing TypeScript, I could tell it to be a TypeScript expert, or, Go or C# or whatever it is. You can actually make multiple developers in here, and you can give them different names. You don't have to name it dev or dev EFE or whatever names you want to use. If you have names that you can easily remember instead of wanting to remember their roles, it's really fun to give them names and personalities and work with that. But with the web orchestrator agent config or the other one, you can look at the examples. It's pretty easy. It'll help you set it up and create the exact personas that you want. So whatever you define in this file, they are now all going to be available to you through the BMAD agent. He will allow you to talk to and transform to any one of these agents. So once you've created your PRD, your architecture, and all of that, right, you're going to want to jump into the actual web here, or excuse me, you're going to want to jump into the IDE and actually start developing to this project that I've started here already. So this is where I'm building a project. This is a daily digest. What this is going to do is this is going to download stories from Hacker News and create a daily podcast, a daily 2-person podcast, much like what I can do manually in Notebook LM, except this is going to send me the daily podcast by email. What we have here, this is the backend service. And the first thing I do before I even started this project, I did start with a starter template. I always recommend starting with a starter template if you already have one. And when you talk to the agent, you tell it you have a starter template, you show it the structure, and it's going to make sure that the documents it create will actually follow your starter template. But in the docs, you're not going to have all of these initially. What you're going to copy out of the web, or if you're using the agents in here to produce these documents, you're going to have a PRD, you're going to have an architecture, that's it. And then you're going to run that sharding task, and the sharding task is going to take your PRD and it's going to pull out these separate epic files. And the epics are what describes the overall large pieces of functionality, and it's already broken it down into these high-level stories. When we run the sharding task on the architecture, it's going to create our API reference that gives us all the details of all the APIs we're going to be interacting with. It's going to give us the component view to really look at which components we're going to be creating. It's going to give us our data models. These are the files that are going to keep the agents on the rail. This probably is one of the 2 most important documents. And this is our project structure. Now, this is the back end, and this is the front end. So it's already laid out here, and it's going to give all of the details of where files need to go. So it knows exactly where to put things, and it has some descriptions here. Now, the tech stack is very important, and one of the big key changes in V3, and actually in V2 we also had this, is we trained the agents to be very specific on versions. Here, we're saying use Axios. In past versions, it might say things like use Axios or fetch. And that is very detrimental if you don't tie it down to one version, because then what your agents will do is they might start using Axios, and then they'll have a unit test that fails. And then if you're not paying attention, what the agent will do, and trust me, I've seen it do this before, is it'll say, oh, I'll use fetch because it wasn't very specific. And so then you'll have 2 different HTTP libraries in your project, not even realizing it, because it made some dumb mistake, and instead of fixing the unit test, it just decided to install like a whole new version or a whole new library. So the key thing with the architecture is the architecture knows that everything needs to be as explicit and defined in here as possible. So you should not see any multiple choice, maybe use this, maybe use that. So you can see here, when I worked with the design agent, we worked on this UX UI spec first, and I described the look and feel that I wanted of this. So the application is simple. There's a list page and there's a details page. On the list page, we're going to look at every day's Hacker News digest that I created. You can click on it and you can go to a detail page. There's going to be a player. You can see stats, and you can go to different links on Hacker News to actually see the comments, or you can just listen to the website. And also there's going to be like ways to subscribe to get the podcast in your email and later post MVP versions. but I wanted to do something different and not just have it look like boring stock Tailwind. So I told it I wanted an 80s retro CRT terminal look, green glowing text, font to really give it that 80s terminal feel. The prompt, the V0 prompt, I had to generate that after we already went through the full PRD in both architectures and the UX UI spec, obviously. So it really understood every page that we need for the MVP. So you can see it's a 3-page responsive web app. It knows the name of the app, what technologies we're using, all of the constraints, all of the design. This is exactly what I envisioned. This is a one-shot. Again, I would have never been able to just like type all this and get this perfectly. When I say this was a one-shot, this was an amazing one-shot. Look at all of this that it did. It even knew the layout of the files from the architecture that I wanted for the front-end architecture, how I wanted the organization of the application from the design architect. And it gave me an app. And when I say a full working app, I mean, this is not calling backend data, obviously, but it's ready for everything else. So as you can see, once I had this all working here and I saw that this all worked, I was just blown away. I was then able to click this download button way over here, and then I was able to just jump into a new project. I dumped everything that I downloaded. The only thing I added here was a docs file with the front-end architecture, which I have not sharded yet here. I will, so it also has everything. But it's already laid out exactly like the design architect even envisioned it, which is great. I ran npm install, so it installed the node modules, and it set up next and everything that I needed. And now I can do npm run dev, and boom. Like, this is literally all I did beyond npm install. And now you can see the application is actually running here on our local host. I'll go to this here, we'll load it. And this is now running from my local machine, ready to be developed, carved up to hit the regular APIs once they're deployed. And just like we saw on the web, this is all interactive, but this is now running from the local machine. Full functioning running web app, built to spec and built to the needs of our actual application. So it's already set up to call and understand the API routes that we're going to be building on the back end. So this is not just a scaffolded UI that has no concept of how it's actually going to work. This is really set up to carve up and implement. The UI will be done in no time. Hey, if you're still here and enjoying this video, please click like and subscribe to the channel. So much more content is coming real soon. What I want to show you right now is how to start coding in the back end. The key to getting this going is whatever IDE you're in, go to the GitHub repo, and I have instructions for every IDE of how to set up your custom IDE agents. I'm not a big fan of rules. I'm in Cursor right now. You will see I have some Cursor rules here, but I'll show you why I have those. But generally, I start with no rules because everything is going to be in the user stories. What you'll want to do is you'll want to install the BMAD agent, because this is your agent that can become any of the other agents if you need them. So to set up the BMAD agent, just come over here to the IDE BMAD Orchestrator Markdown file, copy all of this content, and just like we do with our other custom agent modes, we're going to copy this into a new BMAD agent. Go to Advanced Options if you're in Cursor, paste all of those instructions there, and it will now use the config and all of the folders, just like our web agent did, to become any agent. In the personas folder, there are 2 agents that specifically have the .ide extension. So these are very specifically set up to work with the BMAD method. They're tuned to look for a docs folder with these files, and they know the file names that they need to be able to look for to produce the right artifacts. What you'll want to do is you'll want to install the sm.ide version and the dev.ide agent. The Scrum Master, the purpose of the Scrum Master, as always, is to produce the next story. So I'm going to show you how that works. We've already implemented Epic 1, but you can see here, I have the Scrum Master draft story 1.1. I always start a new context window after each action. Scrum Master creates a story, start a new window for the dev agent. Once that's done, new window for the Scrum Master, then to the dev agent. So you can see I just go through this, create the story, implement the story, create the story, implement the story. I could choose to draft all of my stories at once, but there's a real benefit to doing it this way, and that is because as the dev agent works on the story, it is going to populate the story with a lot of notes. And it's also going to leave notes for the Scrum Master about anything it might need to know that might have deviated or something weird that it just needs to know for the next story. And the Scrum Master will use that when it's crafting the next story. So maybe it learned from a past mistake, it won't do it again. Let's have our agent get started on the new story. So always starting a new chat window, making sure I choose the Scrum Master because this is the one that is tuned. And I'm going to remove everything from context, and just to show you that it doesn't rely on anything being open, I'm going to close everything. So I am going to tell the Scrum Master to draft the next story. And if you like using Super Whisper or anything else, you can also just, of course, talk to it. We're going to let that draft the next story. Basically, what this is going to be doing is it searches the docs folder. It's going to find what the last story that was done was. It's going to look at the epics, figure out what the next one is. It's going to read all of our various architectures, all the sharded documents, and figure out all of the information that the developer needs so it doesn't have to search all of those files itself. And it's going to create a very detailed task and subtask story for the developer agent. This is good. This is actually a protection here. So it is telling me that 1.6 was not actually marked done. So I forgot to mark 1.6 as done. And that's true. It's in review. So we can just mark this as done, save it. I'm going to tell it number 3 here. Go ahead. So that's a safety precaution to make sure that it's not creating or starting to work on a new story when another story was not completed. What I want to show you in here is that in these stories, aside from the checklist, they will also leave issues that it ran into. So I'm trying to find an example of that. Now here's an interesting one. So here's some issues that were encountered when it was trying to set up CDK. It was making some mistakes. So as I said, I don't use cursor rules from the beginning, but when I see things like this and I want it to learn from it and remember it, I will copy this, paste it into an agent window, and tell Cursor to generate custom rules so these things don't happen again. So that's why I have these rules up here right now. But that's a good quick way to just not have it repeat these stupid things over and over again. This is now drafting our story, and it's actually a little bit slow. And the reason it's slow is because it's doing this massive analysis of all of these documents and sections that it read to really figure out what it needs to put into the stories. So, but you can see it found the right story to make. It's going to implement it. And then once it's done, we switch to our dev agent. The agent, the Scrum Master, also runs a story checklist to really make sure that the draft is comprehensive and that it didn't forget anything. It's saying, yes, everything is good and it considered everything. So now we can look at our draft story 2.1. I'm just going to accept it. I'm going to mark it as in progress just so I can show you the developer agent going. It took just this fragment that it needs so the agent knows where to put the code that it's going to work on it. It's pulling what data models it needs to know. We're going to be setting up some step functions. This is actually going to get into some pretty complicated stuff in this 2.1 story because we're setting up a lot of our custom infrastructure and async orchestration. So it's going to be really interesting to see how well the dev agent does with this. And you can see at the end, there's all these placeholders where the dev agent will put notes. So it's going to put its story note progress. It's going to put completion notes for the next Scrum Master. That's what I was talking about. It's going to leave a change log. It's also going to annotate which agent was used. So that creates an interesting history if you want to go back and see which agents you used for which stories. But I'm going to make sure I select my developer agent. And the developer has rules to know to look for the in-progress story or the one that I tell it and start developing it. So I'm just going to say it, let's implement this story. Claude 4 Sonnet seems to be miles ahead of where we were before as far as being able to fix linting issues, test issues. This just seems miles ahead of 3.7. So I've just been loving the experience so far of developing with this new Claude 4 Sonnet, and the power of the BMAD Method V3 just makes it all come together better because the Scrum Master in the IDE and the dev agent in the IDE have also just been fine-tuned to also work much better than they did in V2. So many improvements, can't even go into all of it. Thumbs up, subscribe, join the community. Let me know how this is working for you. No matter your experience level, I know the BMAD agent is going to be amazing for you and help you out. So we'll see you next time here on BMAD Code. Thank you, everybody.